Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to the Global Governance and Diplomacy Workshop. My name is Hae Young-yun, and I am the Assistant Dean for External Relations at the KDI School of Public Policy and Management. It's a great pleasure and honor to have you all here with us today. So today's program will unfold in two segments. First, we have presentations from our distinguished speakers, followed by a discussion session, and each speaker will share their insights on some of today's most pressing global issues, bringing unique perspectives from their respective countries. We're deeply appreciative of their time and, of course, their expertise. Please note that this event is being recorded and will be available to watch on KDI School's YouTube channel for those unable to join us today. And with that, it is our great honor to invite our newly inaugurated Dean, Dr. Jung-kyung Kim of KDI School. Dr. Kim was Secretary to the President for Financial Policy in 2008 and served as President of KDI from 2013 to 2017. And you've already done it, but please welcome him again, Dean Kim.
안녕하세요. Dear ambassadors and distinguished members of the diplomatic corps and esteemed faculty members and students and honored guests, good morning. On behalf of KDI School of Public Policy and Management, it is my honor to welcome you to the third annual Global Governance and Diplomacy Workshop. I extend a warm welcome to former First Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade and Ambassador to the United States, An Ho-young, who will be moderating our discussion today. Thank you. I'm also greatly pleased to introduce our esteemed speakers, Ambassador Marcia Donner Obru from Brazil, and Deputy Ambassador Gareth Weir from the UK, and UN Bysert, Deputy Chief of Mission at the German Embassy. We are grateful for their insight and contribution. Now, as we gather today here, we find ourselves at a critical juncture in global affairs, facing immense challenges that demand our collective attention and collective action. This year's workshop is particularly significant as it aligns with the G20 agenda under Brazil's presidency. The theme, Building a Just World and a Sustainable Planet, that strongly aligns with KDI School's missions of promoting the sustainable development and international cooperation. Brazil's commitment to eradicating the poverty and hunger, alongside its focus on sustainable development and energy transitions, sets a powerful example for everyone. The UK's focus on modernized development policies highlights the need for collaboration in addressing climate change and promoting equality. Germany's ambitious climate targets, very much ambitious, inspire us to pursue innovative and bold actions within our own context. Korea's transformation, as you know, from an aid recipient, very poor countries, to a donor, uniquely positions Korea to bridge the advanced and developing economies. Our rapid industrialization and remarkable reforestation efforts, for example, particularly successful reforestation experience soon to be recognized by UNESCO, Memory of the World, next spring, next year. So this experience offered the key lessons in sustainable growth for the developing society. The relocation of slash and burn farmers. Slash and burn farmers, 화전민 in Korean, between the 1973 and 1978, for 5 years, relocation was completed 100%. That demonstrates how structured planning and community engagement and robust policy implementations can tackle the environmental challenges while creating the new opportunities for sustainable living for the extremely poor farmers. As a result, today, Korea's domestic forest in the mountain, it observe about the 6% of a country's total greenhouse gas emissions. I would like to acknowledge the presence of diplomats from 40 countries today, including the ambassador from South Africa, which will hold the G20 presidency next year. Your participation today, I'm honored to deliver this speech as one of the first duties since taking office last Friday. This is the second day of my official duties. So it is truly privileged to start my term with such a significant event today, alongside esteemed speakers committed to global governance and sustainable development. As we engage in today's discussions, let's keep in mind the urgency of our shared challenges and the strength of collective actions. May this workshop inspire greater international cooperation and innovative policy solutions. Thank you for your presence and contributions. I look forward to a productive session that supports our efforts toward more sustainable and equitable future. Thank you very much for your attention. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Dean Kim. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time to begin our first presentation. We're delighted to introduce Ambassador Marcia Donner Abreu from the Embassy of Brazil. Her distinguished foreign service career began in 1987 and includes roles as ambassador to Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Kyrgyzstan, and most recently as Secretary for Asia Pacific and Russia. And she's here today to talk to us about the G20 in Brazil. So please welcome Ambassador Abreu. Thank you very much.
안녕하십니까, and good morning everyone, and good morning colleagues. Thank you very much, Dean Kim, for your invitation. Although it was still Dean Yun, who used to be a good friend of mine, I hope you follow on his steps. Dear Ambassador An, that he will be moderating our discussions, former Vice Minister of Foreign Relations and Trade, and also former Sherpa of the G20. I found very interesting the initial comments by Dean Kim, and I will try to follow my new consignment that I shall only use 15 minutes instead of 20. So I will mark my my alarm here, okay, so that it will sound. Just a second. Chronometer, alarm timer, 50 minutes. Okay. And then I will have. So, next week, yes, indeed, is the G20 in Brazil. And when we assumed, we took the chairmanship of the G20, when we took the presidency of the G20 a year ago, what we found was a world in disarray. What I say disarray, why? Well, first the conflicts. We had 183 conflicts active in 2023. Some of them we talk a lot about, some of them we don't talk about, and but this results in unbearable human suffering and destruction. More than 110 million people are displaced, of which 40% are children. We have a climate emergency at our door. At current rates, we are going to go beyond, but well beyond the plus 1.5 that we have set as our target in the climate convention. Global economy is not looking brilliant. Yes, inflation was controlled, but the growth outlook doesn't look very promising for the near future and perhaps medium-term growth. The most vulnerable are suffering. They are suffering for a number of causes, but all the SDGs are either stalled or receding at this point in time, and we should be advancing because we are midway to get into 2030. Yeah? And we have the new challenges. We have the demographic pressures. We have the, again, a new technology revolution with the advent of generative AI so prevalent in our lives. So it points, all of these points to the need of structural reforms, but also to the need of better governance at home and at global institutions. So our G20 obviously takes a year. We are going to pass next week, just formally, to pass the gavel to our colleagues in South Africa, and welcome Ambassador Cindy. We are happy to see you today here. And it is the third in 4 countries, 4 developing emerging economies that handle the G20. It was Indonesia in 2022, India 2023, now Brazil, next year South Africa, to be followed by the United States. The G20, as you know, works as countries creating, the chair country creating a set of priorities and a motto. Our motto was to build a better world and a more fair international community. And we settled on 3 priorities. The 3 priorities would be a more equitable international system, focusing on fighting poverty and hunger, then facing the environmental and sustainable development challenges with a big focus on sustainable development and energy transitions, and finally focusing on the reform of public governance, global governance, sorry, because this is where we can really gather up our synergies in the international communities and try to focus on more structural activities and changes for, first, of course, fulfilling the SDGs, and second, for also tackling the many other challenges I referred to, including the situation of conflicts that is not obviously an easy ball for anyone. So I will start with our first priority, that is equitable development, more fighting inequality, I should say. And fighting hunger and poverty are obviously the most important goals in our Sustainable Development 2030 goals. We have today 700 million people still in extreme poverty, a bit more than that, still facing hunger. According to FAO, 2.4 billion people in the world face moderate to severe food insecurity. 150 million kids go hungry every day. So this is why Brazil decided to launch a global alliance against poverty and hunger. And this is a commitment for change. All member countries of the world, all countries of the world are invited to join the Global Alliance. This is a kind of a forum where donors, demanders, knowledge organizations, on-the-field organizations can join together and devise solutions based on already tested public policies to fight hunger and poverty. And then different countries can join in different capacities. And the idea is that we are seconded by a number of important international organizations active in the field, also taking advantage of public policies already tested by countries that had success in these endeavors. And this will be launched next week in Rio de Janeiro. It's actually the first act of the G20 in Brazil. The next goal is the sustainable development and energy transition, of course, to fight the climate emergency that is at our door. The transition to net zero, I say, it has to start now, but actually it has already started. But the progress is not very convincing so far. I think this will be the first year I read somewhere where we are actually going to diminish emissions. They have been growing less faster in the most recent years, but what we are doing is not enough. And this is really a costly and enormous transition, but we have to find ways to do it and do it faster than we were doing. So we are hoping that countries will start presenting their new nationally defined contributions as soon as possible for the next COP30. Actually, today the COP29 is just starting in Baku. We hope to get a lot from that conference, but one particular goal, I think, is to have the final definition of ways in which the famous Articles 6.2 and 6.4 of the Climate Convention will work out. This is how the credit carbons and the international market for credit carbons will operate. And of course, we need to seek reassurances also for financing for climate change. The loss the loss and damage fund has to have more definitions and more assurances concerning funding. And funding for climate transition, for climate change transition is really of the essence. It is also something that is being worked out in many other fora, but the UNFCCC is certainly the most important area. But I'm glad to tell you that in the financial track of the G20 in Brazil, and I'll talk a bit more on that later on, we also got considerable assurances on this issue. So, last issue, and I'm thinking that I'm going to go to fulfill Ambassador Zahn's request for a quick ending to my presentation. The last priority of the Brazilian G20, reforming global governance, call for action. This call for action, first of all, what is this famous global governance? How we govern our international institutions. So I think there has been for many years an understanding that although they are very committed to the betterment of the world, the international institutions we are dealing with these days are not being able to tackle in an efficient way the challenges that are in front of them. This is true of all of them. This is true of the United Nations and its many bodies. This is true of the international financial institutions and of the multilateral development banks. This is also true of the WTO. And what shall we do? So in the Brazilian G20, Brazil believed that we could gather the best of reflections in the membership, in the member countries, to try to put forward a call for changes and a call for reform. And we did that actually understanding that the G20, although it regroups the 20 biggest economies, or the 19 biggest economies, or the 20 biggest economies, and then the European Union, and most recently the African Union. It is just a group of countries. It's not the entire membership of the world. So we say we can show a way, we can suggest pathways, but we cannot decide pathways. The decision has to be the United Nations. And that is just why we decided to convene, and the membership in the G20 agreed, a meeting of foreign ministers of the G20 open to all countries of the United Nations. It was held in New York in the high-level week of the General Assembly on the 25th of September, so just slightly less than 2 months from today. And what they decided there was to adopt actually this call for action based on the fact that, one, the main international institutions that we know, their structure, their architecture dates back from the 40s, the 1940s, I mean, and they do not correspond at all to the world we have today. A number of important players came out into being in the international scenario. The Global South emerged, and the Global South is 85% of the world population, and they don't have, in a way, their main priorities taken care efficiently by the international governance institutions. And on the other hand, they don't have enough voice that corresponds to their real power in the world today, and to their real commitment to a betterment of the current circumstances. So we decided to start in my presentation. I decided to start in my presentation with the United Nations because it is the most important international universal organization. So 3 or 4 points there. One, the General Assembly. Many countries, including Brazil, would like to see the role of the General Assembly amplified in the United Nations. This is the body that is that convenes all the members of the organization, and the real representative, democratic, and accountable body of the United Nations. Obviously, the second step would be reform of the Security Council. This discussion has been going on and on and on for many, many years, never came to a conclusion, but the clear fact is that the current structure of the United Nations Security Council does not correspond to the real distribution of power in the world. In that particularly, it excludes or sidelines entire continents from the permanent membership in the region. So we are very much committed to change that, expand the council both in permanent and non-permanent membership to give it a more fair representation of the world as it is today. The third idea would be to strengthen ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council, to make it more coherent, or its actions more coherent, more coordinated with several United Nations organizations, programs, funds, and so on. And finally, international financial institutions as well, because lots of what ECOSOC does depends on money coming from international financing. And finally, strengthening the peace-building commission, where good results have been attained in the last years. And we would like to have a more representative UN secretariat with no places reserved for specific countries or groups, with more rotation, geographic representation, more women, this sort of situations. Reforming the multilateral trading system, it has been also a long discussion. Now we are in that for more than 10 years, certainly. The organization is not performing well in 2 of its pillars. Came to my end. Second, in 2 of its pillars, and the third one is dispute settlement is non-existing at this point because it doesn't have one of these 2 stages. It's 2 stages, and the last thing is the reform of international financial architecture. Not a mean thing. We need bigger commitments from the international multilateral development banks. We need an international financial architecture fit for purpose that is financing climate change, financing development, financing the challenges of today. We need more commitment to reform. And we need more decision-making power for the developing countries in these institutions. So the G20 will remain committed to that. I think the last meeting of the finance track of the G20 took place appropriately in Washington during the last fall session of IMF and World Bank. And with that, colleagues, I finish. I think we have done a good work in saying we have to have more resources, better employed, better managed to tackle inequality and finance and climate change in this last reform meeting of the G20, or reform of financial institutions meeting of the G20. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Abreu. Our second presentation this morning will be delivered by Deputy Ambassador Gareth Ware of the British Embassy. Since starting his mission in Seoul in 2022, Mr. Ware has drawn on his extensive experience with the Department for International Development, working in the United States, Africa, and Asia in international development, investment, trade, and climate. So please welcome Mr. Ware, who will discuss the UK and international development.
Delighted to be here, and thanks once again to KDI for organising this event and including us and gathering so many auspicious people. And Ambassador Anne, thank you for facilitating as well. We have a strategic development partnership between the UK and Korea, and KDI are a key part of that partnership. And as set out, my background is international development, something that I'm passionate about and something that I've worked for many decades on. So always happy to talk a bit about international development. So objective for me is to share a little bit about the UK's rethinking on international development. We have a strategic review underway, so this is all sort of work in progress, but I'll talk a bit about the what, the how, and the why from the UK perspective. So Ambassador Marcia set this out very well in her start, and I think it's always a good place to start. I stand here today wearing the poppy, which for UK and Commonwealth countries wear the poppy to remember Armistice Day, which is all those that have fallen in armed conflict. And I remember the service yesterday finishes on this, lest we forget, this phrase, lest we forget. And it's the epitaph which, you know, for your tomorrow I gave my today. And it is striking that we keep forgetting this. If you look around the world today, we have forgotten. As the ambassador said, there are many live conflicts underway in the world at the moment. It's also shocking that 1 in 10 of the world population are living in extreme poverty. COP29 kicks off today, and all the latest forecasts put us way beyond 1.5. It's worth noting that many countries are stuck in vicious cycles of debt, paying more on interest than they can on health and education. Inequality, whether that be income, health, opportunity, is stark and getting worse. Again, I note with interest on the day of the US election, Elon Musk's wealth surged by $26 billion, which is the GDP of Sudan. And all of these factors accumulate and affect the most vulnerable most. Those that are most marginalized will suffer and are suffering the most. And at the same time, we have a geopolitical system or geopolitical competition which is making cooperation harder, just when we need it most. And the reason we start here, as the ambassador did before us, is because this is the world as it is. It's important to be hard-headed. This is where we are today as we look at working together on addressing some of these challenges. So then, this is the world, if you like, that the UK elected a new government 3 months ago. So just to give you a very quick flavour of the UK, they've been in power for 3 months now. The Prime Minister is Keir Starmer. They are a Labour government, so a centre-left government. They have set out their 5 missions, and they've set out missions because they're hard and complex issues, and they are objectives that cut right across all government departments. And those missions are here. They are growth, they are climate, they are health, they are security, and they are opportunity. They've also said that these missions are efforts internationally are deeply connected to these UK missions. So very much framing these missions as not national missions, but they are part of an international effort, a collective effort. We will only succeed in growth in the UK by having better and more stable relationships around the world. We will not get to our climate ambitions without working with other countries. Health, we will not protect the UK from pandemics without better partnerships across the globe. So they have restated, in that respect, the ambition of the World Bank, if you like, of working towards a goal of a world free from poverty on a livable planet. Because fundamentally, they believe there is no pathway to development without increasing climate resilience, tackling nature crisis, and improving access to clean energy. And no pathway to a sustainable future without development that leaves no one behind. And these were some of the messages that our foreign minister was able to talk to President Yoon about and his foreign minister counterpart just a couple of weeks ago. So then what is this modern development? Let me give you 2 slides on the what. Firstly, and very clearly, there is a reset on climate and nature. It is right at the centre of UK gross government mission. And that is because the scale of the opportunity that we think we have. The chance to deliver clean, secure energy, lower the bills, electricity bills, and drive growth. This is decarbonisation, but not deindustrialisation. These are the jobs of the future, and we genuinely are putting that into practice. Similarly, we are shifting our climate diplomacy from do as I say, not as I do, to very much leading by example. We will be the first major economy to deliver clean power by 2030. We have closed our last coal plant this year, and that was 40% of our energy mix in 2012. We have 15 gigawatts of offshore wind. We are aiming for 50 because it is cheaper than fossil fuels. Internationally, we have launched the Global Clean Power Alliance, which I no doubt will come up in COP. And this is our country's, our minister's ambition to bring together countries on the transition, energy transition, right across the global north and the global south. Because we need to tackle together the things like the cost of capital, which is triple in the global south what it is in the global north. We need to address our 700 million people without any access to electricity. We need to work on how we diversify production and supply of critical minerals that we all need in this transition, and how we develop and deploy innovative, clean technologies together. So the first mission is climate and nature. Secondly, as we've already heard, is around multilateral reform. Ultimately, there will be no global stability without climate stability. And there will be no climate stability without a more equal partnership between the global north and the global south. And hence, we are pushing for multilateral reform, greater representation in the bodies that shape our shared future, bigger, better multilateral banks following the Bridgetown reform agenda that accelerate take on more risk and accelerate the deployment of billions of dollars of cash and help tackle debt and support investment. And also working much better with the private sector to unlock flows of capital, and certainly the City of London has a role to play there. So, first thing, climate. Second thing, multilateral reform. Third thing is then humanitarian, accepting that over 300 million people will need humanitarian assistance this year, more than double that in 2019, and this is only going to get more. It's only going to increase as we see the effects of climate change. We will work within humanitarian principles and international humanitarian law, and we will work to invest early in action to support those communities most vulnerable. And having worked and lived in Nepal during the earthquake of 2015, I know how much of an impact it does when you invest early in preparation for emergencies. Finally, inequality. In the UK, we passed an Equality Act in 2010, which put into law protection for those who are most likely to be marginalised in the UK. It is the belief that equality is good for everyone. It isn't a zero-sum game. It is in our interests that this is the case. And it's the same philosophy that flows into our international development work. And also the evidence is very strong. Investing in women and girls is the most effective strategy for economic growth and social development, the biggest bang for your buck. We also need to continue to call out unacceptable behaviour. Gender-based violence is pervasive and universal and hugely damaging. 1 in 3 women will experience violence in her lifetime, and that is unacceptable. So then moving from some of the what to the how, because I also think there's a big shift in tone and in approach that the UK is looking in terms of how it deploys international development. Our Foreign Secretary has been talking much more of a progressive, realistic approach, hard-headed approach, one that uses all levers to help deliver our development goals. It's also an approach based on genuine partnership, trust and respect between countries and peoples. It's an approach which focuses more on the long term, recognizing that poverty and inequality are structural challenges that need long-term solutions. It's also focused not just on government, but on broader businesses, diaspora, volunteers, increases the engagement, increases the topics of conversation between peoples on international development. It's also, as I said, not siloed. This is not a job for one government department. This where the government needs to work right across all of our different departments, using all of our different levers to help deliver. There's also a commitment to development effectiveness, to being transparent and to being open to scrutiny before our Independent Commission on Aid Effectiveness, ICAI, or Aid Impact. So the how is also very important to the UK government in terms of how we work together in partnership with others. And finally, I think this is also really interesting, is they've been very upfront about the why and the need to reframe the public narrative. Why are we doing international development? Why do we spend ODA on development? And not try to hide behind anything and being upfront. And I think for me, it's been interesting to see that it's way beyond commercial interest. We're doing development way beyond commercial interest, but because it's in our national interest. Conflict, poverty, migration, pandemics, rising temperatures, nothing could be more in our national interest to help solve together with others. It's absolutely the thing to do to ensure a safe, stable and secure world and livable planet so that we can all prosper. And we have been trying, the UK has been trying to find ways in which we can bring more people into doing that together. So they have things like the Disaster Emergency Committee's appeal. So when they run a committee's appeal, for example, in Gaza at the moment, every pound that people, UK public, raise, the government will match. And so these are types of mechanisms to get more people engaged in international development and understanding why we're doing it so that they can justify effectively taxpayers' money. That's all I was going to say. Hopefully I've done it within the time, Ambassador, so we have more time for questions afterwards, but 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ware. Our third and final presenter is Mr. Wern Bissert, Deputy Chief of Mission at the German Embassy. Formerly, he was the director of the China Division at Germany's Foreign Office and has held diplomatic roles in Washington, D.C., Shanghai, and Beijing. His expertise spans economic and diplomatic affairs across Asia, the U.S., and Europe. So today, he will be speaking to us on the climate change policies and technologies being pursued in Germany. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Bissert.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this event. It's a great honor to be able to speak to you. I think Ambassador Donner and also Gareth Weir have already mentioned in their presentations the crucial role of climate. Today, COP29 is starting, and this is a crucial event which is taking place in very difficult geopolitical circumstances. But of course, we hope that it will be successful and that it will make progress on the way of achieving our climate targets. Today, I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing in Germany. And I would also like to talk a little bit about our climate diplomacy. So first of all, I think it's very important to underline that, similar as Gareth Weir has said in his presentations, we do not see this as a burden, we see it as an opportunity. Climate policy and energy policy also create new economic opportunities. I think Garrett put it very well when he said that actually some renewable energies are now cheaper than fossil fuels. And I think this is also what we feel in Germany. And therefore, we also have a very, very active policy in achieving energy transition. What we want to do is mitigate climate change, reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, improve our energy security, and increase our readiness against external economic shocks, which is very, very relevant, as we have seen in the last couple of years. Here you just see some of our climate targets. I will not look in all of them in the interest of time. I think what is important is that we want to achieve 80% of renewable energy consumption by 2030. We are adopting a strategy which will provide funds to companies which want to reduce their carbon footprint. We'll increase energy efficiency, and we are also open to new technologies like hydrogen. Here you see what pathway we're going to take. We have already made significant headway since 1990. We could reduce our carbon emissions by 46%, but we also have very, very ambitious targets, as President Kim has mentioned before. By 2030, we want to reduce by 65% in comparison with 1990 levels, and in 2045, we want to achieve greenhouse gas neutrality. I think it's important to say this does not only include carbon dioxide, but it also includes other climate gases as methane. I think Germany's climate policy is also interesting because we are also working, like the UK, on phasing coal out. We have a legal commitment to phase out coal by 2038, but our government is even more ambitious, and we hope to achieve that by 2030. At the same time, as you may have seen, Germany has phased out nuclear power. There was a discussion after the beginning of the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine to continue using nuclear power. In the end, the government decided only to prolong the use of nuclear power by 3 months. And we have now totally phased out nuclear power. And I think this is a consensus in German society which will remain valid no matter what sort of political changes we'll face in the future. And I think in order to do without coal and without nuclear, the renewables are really, really important. Germany has been steadily increasing the use of renewable energies. We are now at about 56%, and by 2030, we want to achieve 80% of nuclear energy. This, of course, entails a couple of challenges, stability of the energy system, etc. But I think we are quite confident that together with our partners in Europe, we can solve these challenges. Let me also say a couple of words about our climate diplomacy. I think Germany believes that the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, is really central. And as was already mentioned several times today, COP29 under the UNFCCC is going to start. And despite these challenging geopolitical circumstances, we hope that we'll see some progress, and the German government will be very present in that event. We think it is important to stick with the with the Paris Agreement, trying to limit climate, like the growth of temperatures to 1.5 degrees. As Gareth has mentioned, we're not there yet. We have to make further efforts, and I think it's upon all of us to try our very best to stick to that target. The German government believes in the principle of common but differentiated responsibility. And we think that it is important that Europe and Germany adopt a leadership role. Just as also Gareth has mentioned, I think it's important that we continue to lead by example. We cannot shoulder it alone. We need your support, but I think it's our responsibility to lead by example. A couple of words on climate financing. In Paris, the industrial countries committed to contributing $100 billion a year for climate finance, and Germany has consistently been doing its share, contributing $5 to $6 billion annually. And despite the recent challenges we face in Germany, this is something we're going to continue. So our budget for 2025 will also include an allocation of $6 billion for the fight against climate change. But we think that also the newly emerging economies do have a responsibility. Ambassador Donner mentioned the crucial role of the G20 countries in climate change policy. They account for 80% of the economic output of the world. At the same time, they also account for 80% of the emissions, and therefore we believe that all big emitters, no matter whether they are industrial countries under UNFCCC or not, have a responsibility to make appropriate contributions to international climate action and finance. And I think it has also been mentioned that private sector financing is really, really crucial. I don't think governments can do it alone. What we have to do is to find mechanisms which involve the private sector. And I think if we manage to mobilize funds from the climate sector, it will be much easier to achieve our climate targets. A couple of words on what our priorities are in the years to come. I think it's important to drastically reduce global greenhouse emissions by 2030 and to accelerate the global energy transition. I think Germany is very committed to the goal of tripling renewable energy by 2030 and also doubling energy efficiency by the same date. I think it's important to make the world economy more competitive, fair, and climate future-proof. And I think in order to achieve that, we have to align trade with sustainability goals. I think it's very important to align the WTO with the Paris Agreement and the UN Social Development Goals. I think it is important to continue acting in solidarity with the most vulnerable. We have to protect lives, livelihoods, and health. And I think it is imperative that countries and people who are in special needs have better access to funds. And I think in this context, Germany's support for the Loss and Damage Fund is very important. Germany wants to protect and restore and promote the sustainable use of ecosystem. I think it was President Kim who mentioned the role of forests in that context. And I think also Ambassador Donner has mentioned the efforts of the G20 to reduce the deforestations of tropical forests. And this is one aim Germany strongly supports. I think it is also important to focus on the connex between sustainability and peace and security. We want that the UN, the EU, the OSCE, and NATO focus more on aspects of climate and security. Last but not least, money is important, and I guess it's very imperative to align international finance flows with the 1.5-degree pathway and climate resilient development. In this context, we are committed to the reform of international financial institutions and again to mobilize private financial flows. As COP29 is starting, I think we're facing many, many challenges. I think there are the geopolitical shocks, in particular the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, which have led to an environment where international negotiations become increasingly difficult. We have also recently seen the US elections, and there is a certain uncertainty about the climate policy that the new US administration is going to pursue. And this may also have effects on what other partners are going to do. I think also in Germany, as you may have followed in the news, our government coalition has fallen apart recently. There are many factors for that, but I think also the very ambitious climate policy which the government has pursued may have played a role. However, I think climate change and also its consequences are imminent and undeniable. We really have to step up and we have to increase our efforts. The costs of not doing anything will be much higher than trying to challenge the tackles. And therefore, despite all these challenges, I remain confident that we in Germany will stay in course. And I also remain confident that the international community will come together and take these challenges head on. And I'm looking forward to progress being made in the interest of all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are going to take a little bit of time to transition into our discussion session. So if you will just bear with us while we reformat the stage. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the latter part of our program this morning. I'm pleased to introduce our moderator for our discussion session, Mr. Ho Young-an. He is a distinguished diplomat and academic, having served as Korea's ambassador to the United States, first Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, and G20 Sherpa. Most recently, he led the University of North Korean Studies, focusing on trade, multilateral relations, and diplomacy. So with much further ado, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. An. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Third time luck. Good morning. Thank you so much. Well, I just arrived at this hall at 10 o'clock in the morning. And then Mr. Weir and Mr. Bisot, I came to find that they, in fact, were already here ahead of me. So I suggested to them, well, your presentation is going to be 20 minutes each. And then, well, if there are 3 20-minute presentations, then it will leave very little time for us, for our Q&A. So I suggested, how about cutting it down to 15 minutes? And then Mr. Weir said yes, Mr. Bisot, yes, I'll do my best. And then arrived Ambassador Abre. And I suggested the same thing. And Ambassador Abre said yes. And I was just watching how they were doing. And then I came to find that they are overachievers. So that's how we ended up with having 30 minutes, right? And then, in fact, I attend, well, this kind of functions from time to time. But I have to tell you, my experiences of working with KDI, they, in fact, are professionals. I mean, KDI, they in fact are very good at organizing these kind of functions. And I said to myself, well, let us just think about participants other than presenters. I mean, participants, they in fact must have an opportunity to say something. Otherwise, well, they will not really be having the feeling I made the best of my time, right? So that's how we ended up with 30 minutes. And I was listening to Ambassador Brazil, and then Mr. Weir, and then Mr. Bisot. And I said to myself, Ambassador Abre, for obvious reason, talked about G20. And then Mr. Weir, I was very glad when he said that, in fact, in my foreign service in British government, I have worked a lot on international development issues. Is my understanding correct? So Mr. Weir talked about international development, and then I could tell, in fact, he was talking out of his heart rather than reading the text. So Mr. Weir talked from his heart about development issues. And then Mr. Bisot, when it comes to Mr. Bisot, I said to myself, well, Germany is an overachiever. when it comes to energy, and when it comes to climate change, which is not surprising. Germany can be an overachiever in many different senses of the word. But anyhow, there were 3 different presentations, but all interrelated presentations. And I was listening to them. And I said to myself, if I try to come up with one word to sum up the 3 presentations, that's my question for you. What do you think would be the one word to sum up the 3 presentations? There is no one correct answer, right? But my answer would be call for action. I listened to all 3 presentations, and I said to myself, if it is one, say, phrase to sum up all 3 presentations, it will be call for action. Why do I say that? It's because all 3 presentations, they talked about, well, in Ambassador Abre's terminology, world in disarray, right? War, conflicts, poverty, malnutrition, climate change, all of that, right? And, well, again, all the 3 presentations, they talked about world in disarray. But the second point is, we are diplomats. How are we doing? We are delivering a little bit, but not at the same time, not sufficiently. So I think, again, it was in Ambassador Abre's presentation. Let us just think about SDG. How much progress are we making? 10%. We are meeting on average about 10% of SDG goals. And then when it comes to climate change, how are we doing? Well, 1.5 degree in comparison with pre-industrial temperature. Well, that, in fact, we have to admit, is not going to happen, right? So we are not meeting the goals we set for ourselves. So putting them together, the world where we are today, and then the fact that we diplomats, are not delivering, putting them together, then I think the one word to best sum up 3 presentations would be call for action. Are you ready for action? Yes, I hope, right? So having said that, well, let's open it for Q&As, right? So when I say Q&As, again, I've been to many of these kind of sessions, and you ask the floor, and you say as if you are making a lecture, right? But today, let's make it Q&As, right? So when you take the floor, just try to introduce yourself and clarify to whom you are raising the question, and then you would have 2 minutes to make your question. So who will go first? Who will be breaking the ice by raising the first question? Professor Lee?
Professor Keda School, it's an honor to have have you in this conference. Actually, I have very serious interest question for me, also for us. As you know, Trump administration will come in the U.S., and the Trump administration in the U.S. Has very different view on conflict in the world, also climate issues and many other issues. So I wonder what the new Trump administration will make an impact on the issues we discussed today, and what we should prepare in the future to 3 distinguished presenters at this conference. Thank you.
So Professor Lee, your suggestion is that you are making one question, but at the same time, you wish to hear answers from 3 different presenters, right?
Very quick answers.
Good, good. Sounds like a smart deal, right? Right. So Ambassador Abre, what's your take of the election of Mr. Trump as a president?
Yes, I was expecting this question to start with. It looked obvious. Well, of course, there is a limit to my answer, or even two, because the one is obviously I'm a diplomat and I should not be commenting on other countries' policies. And the second is that we are talking about an administration and a government that has just been elected and we haven't seen in action. Of course, we have seen President Trump in his previous mandate as president, but on the other hand, we see that he comes in this new election and next upcoming administration with a different group of people in a world that is way more complex than when he took office for the first time. We understand that views of people, particularly views of groups of people that have at stake so much when you are going to preside over the most important economy and the biggest security, I would say, pillar in the world, you have to adapt perhaps your views to the new realities. And I think we shall see. I'm in a waiting mood at this point. I would like to see the actions, the decisions that will be taken. We certainly are going to have a change coming in the scenario, but at this point, this is what I personally could say. And then, obviously, everybody is preparing for different scenarios, and we shall act. But remembering, just a week ago, I saw the former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon talking about climate change and what happens if the U.S. comes back. And he said, well, when I used to be a Secretary General, even now I say one thing, I don't have a plan B. We don't have a plan B because we don't have a planet B. And the same can be said for inequality. The same can be said for conflicts. All of this impacts enormously how we are going to build a future of a certain quality for all of us and so many of us that are not in this, nice rooms in nice hotels in developed country capitals. And I stop here. Thank you.
A very good question. I would observe, Trump 2.0 might not be like Trump 1.0. And clearly, as you say, at this point, it's very early. I know all of our leaders have been in touch, including clearly President Yoon. So we will see. I think we will find out pretty quickly in terms of his appointments, and that will say a lot about his approach to big conflicts and other issues. I'd say the thing to focus on for me would be the lessons to learn from the US elections. So the thing that's most interesting that I observe is thinking about why President Trump won so convincingly. What was it about the narrative? What was it about the issues? What was it about the way in which he spun up the narrative, created a narrative and a movement that won? And what does America First mean in the world today? I think those are really pertinent insights for all of us to think about in our home countries, because those will certainly be issues that resonate with certain groups of people.
For Germany, I think the US has been a very good partner and friend over the last 70 years. And I think this relationship has matured, it has become stronger. And I think we are looking forward of continuing this close friendship and relationship with the United States. Obviously, we also have concerns. In the first Trump presidency, there was a lot of discussion about the role of NATO. The role of NATO remains a cornerstone for European security. We are also, of course, immediately affected by the situation caused by the Russian war of aggression on Ukraine. And it remains to be seen what measures the new administration will be taking. I think it is imperative that no decisions are being taken without Ukraine agreeing to them. I think one thing which we will definitely have to do is to increase Europe's role in our defense and security policy. I think my government has been stepping up as far as defense spending is concerned. I think this will be something which we'll also have to do in the coming years. I think in Germany, probably just like in Korea, there are also concerns about the economic consequences. I think we are convinced that a world where free trade is possible is a good world, and we certainly hope that a global economy where free trade is as smooth as possible is in the interest of all of us. I've already mentioned in my presentation that there are also certain concerns what this means for climate policy. Under Trump 1, the US did not really actively pursue the reduction of greenhouse gases in the fight against climate change. But I think we are now 4 years later on. I think the reality of climate change is also sinking into those who have not believed in them. And I think the urgency of doing something is also becoming much more apparent in the United States. I mean, we've had these wildfires in California, we've had floods, we have tropical storms of a strength which hasn't been recorded before, and therefore we are confident that also the new US administration will feel compelled to continue international cooperation on this very important issue.
Thank you. I hope, Professor Lee, you are happy with the 3 answers you got from the panelists, right? So, who has the second question? Gentlemen. So please identify yourself and then we'll just clarify to whom your question goes.
Thank you. I am Ukson, the professor with the KDI School of Public Policy and Management. I'm going to combine all the 3 speakers' topic. So my question is about the international development for energy transition and role of G20. As you know, the energy transition inevitably requires a lot of money to achieve. For example, closing down the coal-fired power plant requires a lot of subsidy for their employees, and also establishing the solar power and wind power requires a lot of infrastructure investment. So I know that the dark countries support financially to developing countries in the field of the energy transition, but as you know, the developing countries they have to take care of many basics like food, health, education, security. So they may not afford to even paying the interest to the loans and concessional loans, etc. So I would like to hear from all 3 speakers regarding how the donor countries can, lessen the burden of loan payment for energy transition of developing countries.
Well, may I make a suggestion? Exactly. Well, as a matter of fact, the first question was from the KDI school. The second question is also coming from the KDI school. So I very much hope that the third question will be coming from the members of the diplomatic corps, right? And then with respect to this, very thoughtful question coming from the second KDI professor. Well, it was suggested this question goes to all 3 panelists, but at the same time, the interrelatedness of poverty, financing, and climate change and G20, I think that point, in fact, has been most eloquently made by Mr. Weir. So could I suggest that, Mr. Weir, you address the question?
Thank you. You're right in the sense the injustice of, or climate justice, as you set out, those that have made least contribution having to pay the highest price is something that we all own and need to face up to. And I think your question's in two. So absolutely, there is a responsibility. The UK has been clear on its role in helping to provide direct public ODA support to developing countries. It clearly also needs to work with partners as set out to reform the multilateral banks, that system that has billions of dollars of capital, to work out how they can be reformed to be faster, to lend more, at better rates, quicker to countries that need it. And debt, as I said, is something that also needs to be addressed so that we can try to work out how we can eliminate some of these debt or work to renegotiate debt so that interest payments come down. So the role of public investment is clear, and hopefully in COP you'll hear more of that in the new quantified goal piece, which I think one of the big priorities for COP29. At the same time, public money will only go so far. It's only going to be a drop. It is nowhere near the scale of finance required to meet the climate goals that we have collectively, which are huge. And so you have to work harder at the private sector. You have to work from the big financial sector, the big pension funds in this country and other countries that have these huge investments that at the moment are quite risk adverse. And you need to work on how we can help mobilize more private sector capital into riskier investments by de-risking those investments. And that's where you get to some innovation in financial products, some guarantees and bonds, other things which underwrite some of these products, which basically make it easier to shift some of the private sector. Similarly, regulation on private sector, making it clearer, some of the standards required, making it much more sort of feature of investment from the private sector, from the cities that we have here. So and ultimately, we're trying to push more private sector money into financing some of these deals, and some of this investment required needs de-risking, needs a lot of thought, but the potential is there.
Thank you. Any member of the diplomatic corps? Ambassador for South Africa.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the colleagues for the presentations. It's two clarity-seeking questions for me from Ambassador Abro and also from Germany, and a request from the UK in terms of the insights within the P5 of the UNSC. Ambassador, the launch of the Global Alliance Against Poverty and Hunger, what form and shape and what does it hope to achieve will it take? And then to you, Germany, you also mentioned a common but differentiated response. What do you mean by that? And then the last one, in the call to action from Ambassador Masha, it's the issue that the South Africa, for example, takes interest in the rest of the continent in terms of the reform, especially of the UNSC, and what are the conversations within the P5 in terms of that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ambassador Abro.
Well, I'm a bit lost because your questions were very extensive. On the last issue of the call of action, what your question was?
Thank you very much. It's only one for you, Ambassador. You mentioned the Global Alliance Against Poverty and Hunger.
Oh, no, I thought it was the last question for me too.
No. What
understand.
form and shape will it take? That is the only question. Then for Germany, it is only one question also. It's those clarity-seeking questions for Germany. It is the common but differentiated response to climate change. What does that mean? And then the last one is only for the UK. So it's one question each. Okay. Thank you.
I understand. I thought it was all for everybody. Well, the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty is the priority at heart for my president and for the government of Brazil at this G20. I think it has been inspired by the fact that actually call of action and call for action is what we need. and a general undertaking that is kind of a platform where you would put together the knowledge we already have on good public policies that have been tested in different countries to combat poverty and to combat hunger exist. They are applied in specific settings, but they may be, if I can say so, successfully exported in terms of their structural elements to different realities into different countries. Of course, you have then the policies, then you would have also to need funding for that. And this funding, again, it exists. We have a number of organizations in the world, including a number of United Nations bodies and programs and funds that relate in one way or another to combating poverty and to combating hunger. If you think that combating poverty does not only equates us to making economies grow, but also ensuring that people have access to services, to financing if they need, to housing, to education. So, and the third element would be really to put together financial resources for those goals. I said, I said already that this exists. And if you put this tripod together, knowledge, demanders, potential donors, and knowledge existing either in international organizations or in other institutions, academia, for supporting the goals of eradicating poverty and hunger, I think we can make a big stride into that problem. So I think this is the basic idea now. It's an extremely complex architecture. It will work if we look at the inception document that we have seen adopted in Rio de Janeiro a few months ago in July. It will be handled by a group, a very small secretariat that will be mostly operating on the basis of secondment from countries and international institutions. We are going to have a small unit in Brasilia and an antenna at the FAO in Rome. The estimated cost for this secretariat is around $2-3 million a year. So it's not really a lot of money. The idea is to better coordinate the resources we have and possibly identify additional resources, including through the reform of international financial institutions and multilateral development banks, in that sense that Garrett referred to, bigger and better and more efficient. So I think this is my answer. If you need more clarification, I'm glad to give it to you afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Mr. Bysett.
Ambassador, thank you very much for your question. You asked what I meant by common and differentiated response. I hope I said common but differentiated responsibility as it's defined in UNFCCC. And that, of course, means that those countries who have created more greenhouse gases have a higher responsibility than others. But of course, the fight against climate change is a common endeavor for all of us. I think in the UNFCCC, there is a clear list of countries who bear this differentiated responsibility. But I think time has moved on since then, and we see that now there are also great emitters who are economically successful and who are not listed in that list in the UNFCCC. That was one C too much. Anyway, so what we think in Germany is, of course, that we take serious our commitments. We have contributed and we will contribute it in the future, but we also especially appeal to countries which have been economically successful, which have been emitting a lot, to do their part, even though they do not have this formal obligation under the UNFCCC. That's what I meant. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
because when we were talking after completing our presentations, I asked a question to my two colleagues, and I don't know if everybody knows, but we are in front of two of the biggest, if not the biggest achievers in terms of emissions reductions. The UK has already halved its emissions, and Germany 46% cut. So this is really incredible, and it kind of amazed me. You see, it's important to see also that it is possible and it is doable. So thanks.
Thank you for that additional thought. Mr. Beal?
It's a great question, and I'm going to have to be up front, and I don't know the latest. I can say it is certainly something the UK cares about, as I said, and the Prime Minister's part of what he wants to do is part of reforming the UN. But I don't know where we're up to with that conversations, particularly with the US elections having just happened, etc. So I guess we want to follow up on.
Thank you so much. Well, this is just the time. This is, 12 o'clock. So we are done with our time, but at the same time, there is one last two. Let's make it two, okay? Let's make it last two questions, right? So.
Okay, thank you. Well, as you mentioned, one word from this discussion would be opportunity. What I've seen is that usually all over the world, when we talk about climate warming, we don't see the full value chain. What we see is generation and final user. And the opportunity comes when you see transmission, distribution, and commercialization of the energy. Because every technology needs, and I mean, what is happening is, as there are new sources, there's a need of changing the grid of the systems of every country. So there's an opportunity, but what I've seen is that the industrialized countries don't want to lose that opportunity either. So there is going to be a big gap, a bigger gap between the developed countries and rich and underdeveloped or way to developed countries. So I want to ask Garrett and Jern, what do you think about it and what should be done?
Well, may I suggest, well, as a matter of fact, Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for very thoughtful thoughts you have just shared with us. And I think opportunity, I mean, your focus upon opportunity, there's a very optimistic message that you're sharing with us this morning. Because when I say call for action, then it is not a very optimistic message, but I'm just listening to you, and I really appreciate that optimistic tone with which you are making your comment. But could I suggest that we hear from the second question, and then turn to panelists for their last word?
Congratulations to the three panelists and also KDF for convening this workshop. I would like to make a question regarding what the ambassador of Brazil mentioned in her presentation. She referred to the reforming global governance, a call to action, and she also mentioned about the emergence of Global South. My question is not specifically directed to her. If she can answer, it's okay, because Global South has to do with the three presentations you made. So the question is, what do you think is the role of the Global South in global governance, and also regarding the UN reform, specifically the Security Council? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So there is a question coming from Ambassador Guatemala, which I think can be best addressed by Ambassador Abre. And then there was one question coming from Ambassador Colombia. And then well, he requested to hear from Mr. Weir and then Mr. Bysert. So I think it will be a good way of wrapping up our discussions. So, Madam Ambassador.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Sana, for your question. Interesting. What's the role of Global South? First, let me say that very frankly, the Global South is not a structured entity. It's a number of very diverse countries that share what I would say the fragilities of being still developing and emerging economies and the accompanying challenges. Now, what is the role of these countries in terms of participating in the reform of the reform of the multilateral or international governance of international institutions? I would say it's always the same role of other countries that do not belong to the Global South either. We all share a stake in the future of this world, in the future of mankind, and where we are going to be in upcoming years or decades if we consider, take into account the challenges we have today. So our role as Global South members is to reflect on the challenges, to have a view of the possibilities, to engage in action domestically, because you cannot think that all your problems are going to be solved by international action regarding you. So I remember one day I saw the Philippine ambassador saying, we have to put a big mirror in front of us, and this is true. We have to look at our own choices and own policies and see how better they are going into the direction we are aspiring to have. Then, of course, it comes to the reform of international institutions, and as I said moments ago when I was making my presentation, these institutions have two advantages. They can put together a lot of knowledge based on experience coming from their own mandates and actions on the field. See, any international institution you look at has a main mandate and collateral or lateral mandates that they implement. So they have a richness of experiences that either worked out well or didn't. And they also can mobilize financing. And if they, and our role in that would be to see where better, according to our own policies and according to the best experience we have gathered internationally, we should be going, because the amounts of expertise, technical cooperation, knowledge transmission, and financing for all of that, we will, of course, have limitations. We cannot think that all will come and be guaranteed. So we also have to elect priorities and so on. This is, in my interpretation, the role of Global South is in this structuring of priorities, structuring of needs, understanding that is a part of individual or national responsibilities, national platforms, national commitments for change. That is that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's a great question. And as I say, as we pursue climate goals, there are always keeping in mind the reality, as I said, the hard reality of growth, of security, of competition in emerging new sectors and technologies. But as I said, from the UK's perspective, certainly our ministers are keen that we have this global clean power alliance as exactly that mechanism that brings together some of the global south and the global north, whatever those phrases really mean. Exactly to look at those questions together so that we avoid further inequality effectively and talk about the shared interests we have in critical minerals, in supply chains, in innovation, in finance. These are things that we all need to work through together in frameworks. So I think the ambition from certainly the UK side is that we don't just do that for one country. We are keen to lead by example, but keen to work with others so that we help solve it for multiple countries.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. If you permit, I make a short remark on UN Security Council reform. I think what is important is that we reform the UN Security Council in a way that it reflects the realities of 2024 and not of 1945. And the G4, Brazil, India, Germany, and Japan have made proposals to that extent, which also foresee a greater role for the Global South. Then to your very difficult question, I think if we want to be successful improving infrastructures and so on in developing countries, it is really imperative that we mobilize private financing. And this is a challenge which is a task for both the developing countries concerned, but also for industrialized economies. So I think the conditions have to be created that such private investment is possible. This is the responsibility of the country concerned. But of course, industrialized countries can help, for example, through development cooperation. I think the UN funds can also play an important role, and that is also one of the reasons why Germany has been consistently financing them, and we will continue to do so. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bysert. Well, now this is the time to, well, in fact, wrap up our discussion this morning. And I think there are many lessons that we learned this morning. And one of the lessons is Mr. Bysert, he loses no opportunity to emphasize why it is important to reform the Security Council. But at the same time, it takes some time for the ambassadors to be warmed up. Because it was only after 30 minutes that ambassadors began to request the floor. So next year, Dean Kim, Dr. Kim, next year, then I think we should be allocating at least 1 hour for the Q&A so that ambassadors could be warmed up for 30 minutes and then begin to raise all these excellent questions, right? So with that, let us just wrap up with the enthusiastic clapping for the KDI for organizing this meeting, and then for 3 panelists for being, in fact, so professional and thoughtful and so forthcoming in their presentations as well as their answers. Thank you so much.
So the clever and wise voice of this discussion. Thank you so much, Master Anne.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So on behalf of KDI School, we would like to once again thank our wonderful presenters and also, of course, our moderator for their somewhat sobering, but as pointed out, optimistic message today, and also for their impactful call for action. So with that, we would like to conclude today's Global Conference and Diplomacy Workshop. We hope to see you same time, same place, maybe not the same place, next year. And we do hope that this event inspires more discussion and more opportunities for collaboration in addressing these global challenges.